A few days from now, if all goes according to plan, there will be a big military parade on the streets of Washington. The date, June 14th, marks the 250th birthday of the U.S. Army, which is something to celebrate in some way. The military protects our democratic freedoms. It's essential. But it's also Trump's birthday. And this kind of military parade is not something the United States has been doing in recent years, but many authoritarian regimes do. So it is very controversial. People are raising alarms about authoritarianism and the expense and more. And there will be protests across the country simultaneously under the banner No Kings. Given how today's media operates, it's very likely that big news agencies will fall into a trap and end up using this day to divide America even further, instead of using it to educate the country about crucial issues surrounding democracy. It doesn't have to be this way. We can push the media to do better in advance, on the day, and afterward. I'll explain. Plus, speaking of militaries, big media blew it so badly on coverage of an American and Israeli effort to bring aid to Gaza that the White House called out a major news agency. This is so backward. The media is supposed to be correcting the government, not vice versa, but it keeps happening when the media blows it. Meanwhile, another news agency, quite possibly the most institutionally biased newspaper in America when it comes to this subject, pulled something they had posted. They almost never pull anything. You'll hear about this ahead. It's a powerful reminder that when it comes to protecting democracy, big mainstream media claim to be doing that, but aren't. And speaking of that, as you hear this, again, if all goes according to plan, I will be on the other side of the world from where I usually am, and I need your help. I'll explain all that and more coming up today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. So great to have you here. I'm Josh Levs. This is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact-checks the news. Something I'm really passionate about doing. We cannot solve anything unless we put facts first, always. We need to align around truth, especially in this era of so much misinformation all over the place. The media should be leading the fight for truth, but instead it fails you every day. I spent 20 years inside mainstream media, 10 on NPR, 10 on CNN, where I became lead on-air fact-checker. I saw these problems inside the media. This show corrects the many things they get wrong and exposes systemic problems driving that failure. Along with this show comes a newsletter, which is free, and I encourage you to sign up for it. You'll find the link in the show notes or at my website, joshlevs.com, JOSHLEVS.com. I include so many links there because I don't expect you to take my word for anything. And I make additional content available to paid subscribers, and I'll be talking to you a little bit more about that later in the show because of a trip that I'm about to take. But let's jump right into this. There is a parade coming up in Washington. This kind of military parade is something that military leaders opposed during Trump's first term. They said they didn't want to politicize the military and that it would come across that way. Comedians have been having a field day with this. Here's Stephen Colbert. This was when Trump's trip to the Middle East was ending, where he had met with dictators of Arab nations, including Qatar.
He's going to bring a taste of dictatorship back home when he does, because he's throwing a big military parade on his birthday featuring 6,600 soldiers, 150 vehicles, and 50 helicopters. He wants overwhelming force because this is more important than D-Day. It is his B-Day.
A lot of the complaints about this parade are that it's something dictatorships do. And most of the countries that have huge military parades to this day are non-democratic authoritarian nations. Russia does this, China, Iran, North Korea. South Korea is a democracy. They have a military parade. Trump was inspired by Bastille Day in France when he was there during his first term. They are a democracy. Big news agencies cover Bastille Day every year. Here's some sound from the AP last year. Now, some people are arguing that there's an important nuance here, that Bastille Day is about a lot more than military power. It's an important national holiday. But displaying military power is a big part of it. Also, the idea that it's inherently authoritarian to have a military parade runs up against the reality of American history.
15 United Nations heroes arrive in New York to help launch a nationwide drive for the sale of war bonds.
This is archival sound from 1942.
Up Broadway, men of England's RAF, men of America's Navy, men who have met their enemies and defeated them, respond to the cheers of New York's millions.
Actually, the New York parade in 1942 included a giant bust of FDR, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, you can see video of this and an image of that bust in the newsletter. No one tell Trump about it, though, please. When people say this is so authoritarian in and of itself, that is all too easy for people to shoot down in the media. Here's what the media would usually do, and probably in many cases will this weekend. They'll show the military parade. They'll show protesters at simultaneous events calling it authoritarian. Then they'll show Bastille Day video and historic footage, and that will make it look like, hey, there's nothing to worry about here. At the end of that, what have you learned about what's going on in America? Remember, truth requires two things, facts plus context. There are important things going on in America right now that do present serious threats to democracy. When you look at ongoing events in that context, then you can see this parade differently.
Threatening my neighbor and dear friend and a man of, perfect character in Tony Evers next door.
That's Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, former Democratic vice presidential nominee on MSNBC. He was talking about threats from the Trump administration that they might arrest Wisconsin's governor. Here's the short version on that. Armed immigration agents have been raiding a lot of places across the country, demanding information, arresting people, in situations that numerous judges, including conservative judges, have said violate due process, that these were illegal. The state of Wisconsin sent out guidance for state employees on what to do if that happens at state offices. I read it. It basically says to ask for badges and verify identities, to ask to see documents, to keep these folks in public areas, to call the legal counsel's office, not to hand out information without speaking to an attorney, protect confidential information. I'll post it in the newsletter so you can see it. In a case like this, it's important to understand the only way democracy works is if you don't go straight to threats, but you instead iron out what is and is not allowed at each level of government, in this case, federal versus state. And that used to be a really prominent issue among Republicans, the whole idea of states' rights standing up to the federal government. Also, within the federal level, Trump has been pushing against balance of power, going against the courts, for example. We have 3 branches of government. And democracy only works if checks and balances work, which means accepting that the other branches can keep the executive branch in check. I know some people want Trump to run roughshod over other branches when they don't like what those branches are doing. But democracy can't work that way. And of course, if one president can do it, another one can too. So someone from the far left could become president and then go do the same thing with what they want. The rules have to apply always. Anyway, with that context in mind, you can hear Tim Walz as making an important point.
Look, we're going to have a military parade for him. I was only half tongue-in-cheek saying this guy will be in a military uniform before long. He is fully headed towards authoritarianism.
But that kind of nuance doesn't come through in most media coverage. Either the media is very superficial and just bangs through point without context, or they're so entrenched in the left that they just present everything as being obviously corrupt and dictatorial, as though you, the audience, will share their assumption, so you don't get to learn from them either. That empowers right-wing media to give you the opposite very simple narrative, like Jesse Waters on Fox.
Democrats have to hate Trump more than they love America. They're already upset about a birthday parade for the American military. Do Democrats realize protesting a military parade isn't the best idea ahead of the midterms?
A few more crucial points on this that the media should fact check and explain, but is unlikely to. First, the expense. It's currently estimated at $45 million. Here's Jess O'Connell, a former leader of the Democratic National Committee. She was speaking on the BBC.
We want to save a little bit of money. Why don't we cancel Donald Trump's military parade on his birthday in a few weeks and save about $50 million for taxpayers?
Trump says that the cost will be nothing compared to how much the country makes from the parade. I have seen Trump quoted about that in so many reports, and I haven't seen anyone ask him what he's referring to exactly. It is possible. Maybe the world needs to see American military might, and that could lead to a lot of economic positives. But what are the arguments for that? And for context, the media should compare this cost to things that this administration has slashed, like life-saving scientific research, tons of jobs that keep our nation safe, people at the FAA keeping air travel safe. I just wrote a piece for The Contrarian, and you can see it in my newsletter. It's about veterans and how they're being hurt by this administration. Some veterans held their own protest this past Friday. Trump's moves have been hurting veterans in numerous ways. They make up 6% of the U.S. population, but 30% of the federal workforce, so they are disproportionately losing their jobs. The VA, which is the medical system for veterans, has been losing employees. He slashed funding for the suicide hotline. Even though suicide is a leading cause of death among veterans, veterans voted for Trump in November, but it's unclear how many still support him. I will tell you this, there is a new poll out, but it's not so helpful, so I'm not putting a lot of stake in it. This poll is from Data for Progress. Now, you might hear a summary somewhere that says 70% of veterans oppose this parade, but that's not what the actual question asked. 70% of veterans said they oppose the Trump administration ordering active duty U.S. military troops to perform a parade in honor of President Trump's birthday. That is the specific question. And by the way, it should be 100% of veterans and Americans, because the military should never be ordered to do that. Anyway, that question did not say for the 250th anniversary of the founding of the U.S. Army, which happens to fall on his birthday, so it was leading respondents to answer a certain way. This poll found veterans split on Trump, just barely approving of him overall by a slim margin. It also found that among veterans who feel strongly, more have a very unfavorable opinion of Trump than very favorable. But like I said, I'm not sure how much we can trust this one poll. I will need to see more. One last point here. Trump's team has been pushing this angle. Here's Ambassador Monica Crowley, chief of protocol of the United States, on Fox.
And the military, we've seen record recruitment for the Army.
It was up under Biden, too. And the current fiscal year, which shows this increase in recruitment, this is confusing with how fiscal years work. It dates back to this past October, when Biden was still president. So we don't actually yet know Trump's effect on military recruitment. That will take time. It's possible that it's still going up, and we should all appreciate those who put their lives on the line to fight for democracy. Okay, so where does all this leave us? Well, two-dimensional news coverage will just push people further into ideological camps. Quality news coverage would tell people all these facts I've just given you. That would help people understand that you can love America and the members of the military and be concerned about any and all threats to democracy, including from President Trump, who has praised dictators and gone against the courts. You can love this parade or not. That's a matter of opinion. From the media, we need facts plus context. Help people get educated about what's going on with threats to democracy here and around the world. Speaking of that, coming up is the latest proof that big mainstream news agencies don't actually care about a cause that they have been preaching for close to 2 years. The messages that listeners like you send in are amazing. Whether they're written messages that you have me read, I think the work you are doing is one of the most important causes that I've seen in quite some time. I love that I can't tell from your podcast if you are a Republican or a Democrat. I love that nobody's off limits and that you cite exactly where you see the fallacies. Or voice messages.
This show is exactly what we need at this moment in time. Josh is a passionate advocate for journalism, calls things as he sees them, and is actively working to reestablish the credibility of the profession. And we all know a strong and independent media is crucial for democracy to exist and flourish.
I really enjoy listening to your podcast. And more than that, I've really enjoyed and been thankful for your fact-driven and data-centric approach, especially during these
I just
times.
wanted to say how much I love your podcast. I really appreciate the meaningful content you share and your commitment to accuracy in journalism. It's so important to have a clear understanding of key news events and topics.
Thanks for always keeping everything real when you're informing us on your show. Good job, and keep up the good work, brother.
Thank you for your wonderful show. They stand corrected. As someone who is surrounded by media all day, having an individual take the time to expose the outright bias and lack of credibility in media today is just wonderful to see. Keep doing what you're doing. You're inspiring the younger generation, like people like me too.
Thank you to everyone supporting this show. To submit your message, get in touch through the newsletter or the form at my website, joshlevs.com, JOSHLEVS.com. You'll find links in the show notes. Last week, I told you how the media lied about Israel allegedly shooting at Gazans while they were collecting aid. And the lie never made sense. The constant anti-Israel lying by big mainstream media is getting Jewish people killed everywhere, including in the United States. I wrote about this in my newsletter and in my latest column for the Times of Israel. They have a bunch of good coverage there. Anyway, the Washington Post was among the many big outlets that pushed that lie. And the Post actually pulled something. They almost never do that. If you're new to this show, you should know I've explained in previous episodes that people overseeing Middle East coverage at the Washington Post are former employees of the Qatari government. Yes, the same dictatorial government I mentioned earlier that Trump met with and was all excited about accepting a giant plane from. These folks at the Washington Post and a lot of other sites used to work for Qatar's state-owned propaganda giant known as Al Jazeera. The Washington Post put up a post on X, formerly known as Twitter, pushing this lie. Then they actually pulled it, saying that their initial claim did not meet editorial standards. These days, it's hard to tell if they even have editorial standards or what those are. But that move came after millions of people saw the initial post and are still spreading it through screenshots of the original post. And the world is believing this insanity. They know that when they report something and later on pull back on it, well, by that point, they've done the kind of damage that people inside the Post want to do in the first place. Meanwhile, the BBC blew it as well. And in a White House press briefing, a BBC reporter used a question to push this lie. This was in a question to White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt. Here's part of her response.
The administration is aware of those reports, and we are currently looking into the veracity of them because, unfortunately, unlike some in the media, we don't take the word of Hamas with total truth. And I suggest that journalists who actually care about truth do the same to reduce the amount of misinformation that's going around the globe on this front.
The media is setting up the Trump administration to be truth tellers at moments like this. This is how backward it is. This spokeswoman, just like other members of the administration, have lied repeatedly, pushing false claims for the administration, things I have fact-checked here. And the media is so disastrous and backward on this that the Trump White House gets to correct them. The media needs to wake up and understand this. But there's a whole other story here. Throughout this war, the media has been harping about Gazans allegedly experiencing famine, even at times when studies showed that plenty of food was sent in. And there's been video proof that Hamas has been stealing aid and trying to control it. The United Nations is supposed to play a central role in getting the aid to Gazans, but instead it was being stolen. This new delivery bypassed the UN. It involved a U.S. agency working with Israel to get aid directly to Gazans. Here are a couple clips from Sky News Australia.
Crowds of men chanting and cheering Donald Trump and America's name after they received desperately needed aid relief from a US and Israel-backed aid center. Thank you, America! This Gazan slammed Hamas for leaving Gazans in a desperate state whilst thanking Americans for saving him.
Meanwhile, at the UN, Israel's representative explained that the UN has been punishing groups that take part in getting aid to Gazans this way. He said the UN is acting like a mafia. That's no surprise. The UN has been part of the problem in the region for decades. I've talked about this in previous episodes. It is structurally designed to keep people in Gaza and in Palestinian areas of a stretch of land known as Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, to keep them as permanent refugees, permanent aggrieved victims, instead of building a society. The UN is structured this way financially. It has one agency for refugees who identify as Palestinian and another for all refugees in the entire rest of the world. It's crazy. Anyway, this is the reality on the ground, okay? So, what does the New York Times do? This is just tragicomically hilarious. I saw this, and a few listeners sent it to me too. Here's what the Times reported. Quote, for most of the war, experienced groups like the United Nations have distributed aid. So we're now coming up on close to 2 years of the New York Times saying that people of Gaza cannot get aid. Now we're suddenly supposed to feel that the UN's experience means that the world should stick with the UN, which has clearly been failing. The Times also said that they could not verify that Hamas has diverted aid trucks. They are constantly reporting information from Hamas as though it's factual and never telling you that they cannot verify it. Start with the death toll claims. When's the last time you heard them say, and we cannot verify this? Those come from Hamas. But when it's any information that Israel provides, it's, oh, we can't verify this. They are telling you not to trust that. There is one thing, though, in this write-up that was a good thing to see. It surprised me they even put it in there. Instead of only blaming Israel for not letting reporters into Gaza, this write-up also said Hamas restricts what journalists can report within the territory. Journalists who go into Gaza regularly do the bidding of Hamas. Either they share the ideological pro-terror goals of Hamas, or they don't have a choice because they want to keep reporting there, and that means they have to do Hamas's bidding for them. Let's look at this dichotomy. Mainstream outlets using their might, their global microphones, to push lies that destabilize and endanger the only democracy in the Middle East, that help Islamist fascist forces get new recruits who chant death to America. Those growing groups present increasing dangers to America. And to keep America safe, we need a strong military. So we've got the media, in many cases, calling out this parade as a sign of potential impending fascism, which in a way, in context, makes sense, but they're simultaneously boosting Islamist fascism. That is insane. And that brings me to an announcement for you. I'll be right back. Which of these 3 pieces of music do you find most inspirational? Here's choice A. Here's B. And not to influence your selection, but I think my personal favorite, C. Here's how you vote. Go into whatever app you're using to listen to this podcast, and be sure to click the subscribe button and rate the show. Give it 5 stars. And if it has a review section, then review it. That is the way that you show these platforms that they should be recommending this show to other people. If you use Spotify, you'll see how to give it 5 stars. And if you use Apple, you can do 5 stars and type in a review. So while I play you this music, just pull up that section of the app and type in something awesome about this show so people know. Okay, ready? Go. Hopefully most of you are fiddling with your phones now. Obviously, if you're driving, have somebody else in the car do it. Or decide that before you get out of the car, after you park, you'll take care of it then. Here's a few more seconds for those of you to do what you're doing. To everyone who has given the show a great review, thank you so much. Here's what you do. Send a note to this show and let me know which of these pieces of music was your favorite. A, B, or C. I'll use that in a future episode. After all, the whole point of inspirational music is to inspire you to go do something awesome, right? Well, hopefully you just did. For a moment there, you have been a hero to this show. Thank you. As you listen to this, if all goes according to plan, I will be in Israel. I'm recording all this and then basically hopping on a plane. As you know, I focus on things that the media is getting wrong, and I focus especially on the most dangerous ways in which the media is wrong. And right now, democracy is at stake. Being in Israel, the most lied about place on earth, will be so important. I'll be meeting with people of different backgrounds and perspectives, and I'll be speaking with survivors of the October 7th massacres. There's a lot that I'll be covering, and I need your help. It's going to take time and energy, yes, and it's going to be expensive. So if you would like to support this, you can become a paid subscriber at the newsletter. I would especially love for you to become a founding member. I will see it right away. I will message you from wherever I am, and I have ideas of some things I can do to thank you. And look, I know not everybody is in a financial position to do that, but there are free things you can do, like tell somebody else about this show. Send it to someone you know and say, I think this episode in particular will speak to you. That makes a huge difference. Also, rate and review it on the platforms. That is how the algorithms know to recommend this show to other people. As always, I'm so grateful to you for listening, and I will see you next week. Hi again, just popping in quickly to let you know I made it the 6,400-mile trip. And I've already begun meeting with people who are doing such important work, including fact-checking work. I've been meeting with people who are making me realize things about the future of fact-checking in general. I'll be telling you about that when I put together this episode. Thank you to those of you who are already helping make it possible, and to those of you who still might. I'm keeping my voice a little bit quiet here because it's 2 a.m. now, and I'm not all that far away from other people. And on a separate note, this Sunday is Father's Day. Some of you might know I've spent years fact-checking fatherhood, telling the truth about modern dads, and how U.S. dads and dads in so many countries are doing so much better than the stereotypes suggest. I wrote a whole book about it called All In. And on my website, joshlivs.com, there's a section about it called Dad Facts, where I list out lots of the most popular myths about men as parents, and I show proof that those myths are false and damaging, and bad for women and children, bad for everybody, because lies in general hurt everyone. Anyway, all that is to say, to those of you who are awesome dads, happy Father's Day to you and to everybody